Welcome to Highly Sensitive, Happily Married, the podcast that teaches you to not only have an easier marriage as a sensitive woman, but to have one that feels more amazing by the day. Where you'll hear relatable stories, love advice that works, and coaching on how to have a marriage where feeling upset and disconnected is a thing of the past, and where instead a sense of loving connection and even fun and lightness is the norm. I'm Hannah Brooks, highly sensitive person, love expert, and marriage coach, and I'm so happy to be on this journey with you. Hello, my lovely ones. Welcome to episode 171, where we're going to talk about what I consider a pretty big barrier to a culture of positivity, for lack of a better word, in your relationship. And that is specifically editing yourself, and why we do this. Because it is a somewhat common thing that I have seen in my work with my beautiful, wonderful, amazing, highly sensitive and deep feeling women. But before we dive in, I want to highly and lovingly encourage you to subscribe if you've been enjoying this podcast, and also leave a rating and a review, particularly over in Apple Podcasts. Not only will that ensure that you don't miss an episode and that you're alerted as soon as the episodes publish, but it helps the podcast reach more wonderful, deep feeling and sensitive women like you who could really use the guidance and the support and the help that they'll get by knowing about and listening to this podcast. It'll only take you a couple minutes of your time, so please head over, hit subscribe, hit rate and review, and leave a nice review. Thank you so much ahead of time, and thank you so deeply from the bottom of my heart for everyone who has already done so. All right, let's dive in. So you have heard me talk a lot about how easy it is to focus on what we don't like in our partner, and to therefore not feel like being kind, loving, affectionate. And of course, that in itself is a barrier to the affectionate, supportive, loving marriage that I know you want. It's an especially common one, and it's one reason why I talk about it a fair amount. But I have spoken way less often of another phenomenon I've seen over and over and over, where even when we may look around at people in obviously thriving relationships, and we may think to ourselves, I really want that, I'm envious of that, we still may override our own urges and inclinations to be kind and affectionate and encouraging and loving to our spouse. In other words, even when we may want a super loving, affectionate marriage, we may nonetheless edit our loving impulses and end up dimming our power to create a culture of deep positivity and supportiveness in our relationship. And as odd as it may sound, it really is a relatively common theme in many of my clients' relationships. I mean, it does sound kind of odd, right? Like if you feel loving or like you want to express your positive feelings about your spouse to your spouse, you would just do it, right? You'd think so anyway. But no, over and over, I've heard my clients tell me that they hold back, even when they feel that urge to do something positive. And again, I want to caveat for this word. I am using this word positive with air quotes. It's a super general word, but I do think it encapsulates a lot of what I mean without having to use like 15 words. So know that that's an umbrella term. So the question that might come up is why? Why do we hold back sharing our love or our positive feelings or our affection to our spouse when we feel like we want to? Well, it's just one of those human things. It's because of a very human resistance to feeling discomfort. In other words, what I've called negative emotion aversion. Right? Most of us, many of us, maybe not all of us, but most humans tend towards having a tendency towards negative emotion aversion. But highly sensitive people and deep feeling people can tend towards this in an especially big way. And part of that's because we have such deep feelings. So those negative emotions feel especially strong. And so it can be easy to kind of want to avoid them, right? To turn away from them, to go in the direction that we think we'd feel the least of them, or we wouldn't have to feel those harder emotions. I am going to share a bit more about negative emotion aversion in a few minutes. But first, I want to illustrate what editing yourself might look like in your relationship and why you may do it with an example from a client. So my client, Ellen, was feeling envious of the affectionate, loving relationship one of her friends had with their spouse. And she saw that there was this great connection and a sense of super supportiveness between this couple, her friend. And she just felt despair about her own marriage in comparison. She really wanted a culture of more positivity, like encouragement and complimenting each other and being affectionate with her husband, like she saw that her friend and her friend's partner had together. But she said that she felt hopeless and helpless to create that same kind of relationship with her not so affectionate and communicative husband. As I helped her dig into what was really going on here, why she felt helpless about creating it, we found that she wasn't and hadn't really tried to create that positive culture in a what we might call positive way. As happens with so many of us, in an attempt to get her husband to be more communicative and obviously outwardly loving, she'd tried the route of getting angry at him for not being more that way. She'd tried the scolding him route. She'd tried the reacting intensely route. And of course, this is all too easy to fall into, I know. And as always, it wasn't working. It was actually, as usual, making things worse. And she recognized this. But what she hadn't fully recognized is that she hadn't tried the other way. She hadn't tried going the route of following her loving impulses, which was a little bit funny because she is such a deeply loving, super supportive, encouraging, kind person, like so many highly sensitive people. But as we coached together, she saw that she had held so much of that part of her back in this relationship. She hadn't been letting herself encourage her husband like she wanted to, even when she saw he was struggling. And she could really feel herself wanting to encourage and support him. She didn't let herself say really supportive things. She didn't give him compliments or appreciations, even though that is a huge part of who she normally is. So why? Why was she holding this part of her back? You got it. Negative emotion aversion. She was unconsciously scared of his reaction. She worried about his reaction to her positivity, that he would feel uncomfortable when she started encouraging him and saying supportive things to him. And therefore, she would be uncomfortable. She'd be uncomfortable because he'd be uncomfortable. And so because she was afraid of being uncomfortable, she was afraid of those emotions that she might feel if her husband felt uncomfortable with her compliments and encouragement, she stopped herself from bringing the things that she wanted into her relationship. She stopped herself from even really being who she is. In other words, she was editing herself, which ultimately equals editing the depth of connection and goodness in her marriage. To put it another way, of course, she was feeling helpless to make her marriage more connected and supportive and loving because she was completely stopping herself from creating that more positive, loving culture out of fear of feeling discomfort. And of course, she's not alone in this by any means. We sensitive and deep feeling people can so easily let our own discomfort stop us from having way more comfort in our relationship. I've seen it time and again. This is what negative emotion aversion does to us. And it's way more common than you think, and it happens in so many ways. It, of course, happens when we have something hard and honest to say to our spouse about like a problem that we're having or feeling in our relationship. That can, of course, and obviously bring up emotional aversion or negative emotion aversion. right? The desire to avoid feeling the hard, uncomfortable feelings that will likely surface when you're going to share something hard. I bet a lot of you can relate to that. But of course, that negative emotion aversion, if we let it, it will make us not want to say that hard thing and not say that hard thing, even if it's so important to share it. As I'm sure you know, feeling so uncomfortable that you don't want to share the most important things, the most honest things, is not a great way to live, is not a great way to be in a relationship and actually have that a relationship stay strong and evolve and be deeply loving. And this is so common, like holding our important truths back, not sharing and communicating important things because we're afraid of the negative emotion we might feel. It's so common that I actually made an episode all about this very early on in the podcast. It's episode 31. It's called Negative Emotion Aversion and Communication Inhibition. That's a must listen. But the same inhibition can happen when it comes to sharing our loving, kind, supportive impulses in our marriage. This can come up just as strongly for some of us when what you want to share is loving, is affection, is the best of you. Again and again, I've seen clients hold back from expressing this part of themselves for fear of what feelings it will bring up. So even if you aren't sure you do this, listen to these examples and see if there may be a trace of this going on for you too. So I had another client who didn't want to hug her spouse much because although she would have loved to have lots more hugs, she thought he maybe wouldn't want to because he didn't tend to initiate hugs. She was afraid if she started initiating hugs, he would get weird and then she would feel weird. Or how about the many clients who've said, "Oh, that's so not him," or "He'll feel weird if I do that." When I encourage them to say that loving thing or make the kind, affectionate gesture, they tell me they fear it will make him uncomfortable. But the deeper reason, if they're really honest with themselves, is that they will feel uncomfortable. That his discomfort, if it comes up, will stir their discomfort. And so they just don't do it. They don't do the affectionate thing. They don't give the hug. They don't say the kind, loving thing. And therefore, their relationship isn't so full of the kind, loving, supportive things. Does that sound at all familiar? So many of my clients, many people I've heard from, fall into this trap. They don't do the affectionate thing until I help them see what it's creating, which is discomfort for the long term. An environment in the relationship in which they cannot be themselves fully. A marriage where the best of who they are isn't welcome. A marriage where the love and affection and supportiveness they want is not allowed to develop because they themselves are not allowing it. All because of the fear of feeling discomfort. Please understand that their spouse isn't creating this. They are. They're letting their fear stop them, edit them, squash out their goodness and kindness, which really is their very essence. So if this sounds like it might be happening on some level for you too, please understand it is good for no one. Not you, obviously, and not for your spouse, because you not being you is not the way to safety and deep intimacy and real connection. It's also not giving your spouse the chance to grow and open to the love that will nourish them deeply too. And although in this episode I am mainly talking about editing your kindness and affection and such, the same goes for when you hold back your other deeper truths, such as where you are hurting or what your deep desires are, in order to avoid experience the discomfort of negative emotion. I personally very much get that fear and the editing of one's deeper truths, including love and kindness, the expression of love and kindness. One big example in my life that I remember really distinctly is in the first 5 to 7 months of my relationship with my husband. I was terrified to say what I wanted so badly to tell him, which was that I love you. If he reacted less than positively, I feared I'd feel so rejected and hurt and oh so awkward. So it was really quite scary. And I didn't say it despite the deep urge to for months. So again, I can really relate. But these days, after lots of emotional skill building, I'm very much no longer afraid to feel hard emotions, to feel emotional discomfort in my marriage, especially when it comes to sharing the hard things and the love that I have too. And this, I believe, is one of the biggest reasons my marriage is so great, because being unafraid allows me to face the hard things with grace, and it allows for the most honest and deeply loving conversations. It allows me to show my whole self and risk rejection, and therefore feel the enormity of my husband's love of all of me, and to rest in the super security that leads to when he inevitably doesn't truly reject me. When, even if it's a little bit uncomfortable and it's not easy at first, he ultimately finds his way back to total acceptance of me. That's like the deepest sense of security and the sense of fully and truly being loved. And it's not like because I'm not afraid of feeling hard feelings that I go create more of them. It doesn't mean I'm reckless or that I don't try to navigate things in ways that minimize unnecessary pain. I never use this lack of fear of discomfort as a reason to go around being careless and saying rude things, or to not try to be the best of myself and navigate our challenges with the most grace and kindness possible. I actually think the skills I've developed that have allowed me to be comfortable with the discomfort of hard emotions have actually allowed me to be a much more peaceful, loving partner who can respond way more intelligently and caringly and in ways that heal and connect and strengthen our relationship, rather than reacting in ways that disconnect and damage our relationship. And it's not just me. As my clients grow at feeling comfort with uncomfortable emotions, they too navigate their relationships with so much more of the best of themselves. And this is one of the biggest reasons their marriages get so much better and their partner evolves in the best of ways alongside them too. Ellen, the client I told you a little bit more in depth about a few minutes ago, she's been a really good example of this as she got more comfortable with her own harder, more uncomfortable emotions. And as she also learned to not create so many of them by guiding her thinking, as I deeply help my clients do, she was able to be her supportive self with her husband so much better. And they are doing better than ever at the moment. She even told me they had the best conversation ever the other day about their relationship and about their future. And he was being much more open about his feelings than ever. And the culture of trust and lightness and love between them has grown by leaps and bounds. This is really what happens when we start feeling peace with our harder emotions, and we therefore start allowing our best selves to come forward in our marriages. So you may be wondering, how do you stop fearing the discomfort of your negative emotions that come up so you can navigate your relationships with the best of yourself and therefore lead your marriage into the best of itself? Well, there is a lot to it, and I work with clients individually on this in depth, of course. But I want to give you 3 keys right now to help, especially for when you fear your own feelings that may come up in reaction to your spouse's awkward reception of your loving expressions. In other words, if you think something you want to share with him, some hug you want to give, some gesture you want to make might feel weird and awkward to him, or he might react strangely to it, and therefore you're nervous because you'll then feel weird, here are some keys to help you feel much more comfortable with any discomfort that might arise. Okay. Key 1. Interestingly, it rarely happens as we fear it will. our partner rarely reacts as poorly as we fear they might to a kind, loving thing we offer. Most people, even if they are awkward or a bit uncomfortable at first, are actually quite happy when more positivity enters into the relationship. And they ultimately do feel safer and more able to reciprocate. So a case in point, one of my clients, when I assigned her to do weekly check-ins with her husband that emphasized appreciations, she told me he'll never go for that. Lo and behold, he eventually started being the one to remind her that it was Thursday and time to do their appreciations. And then there's Gina, who I did a podcast interview with, who began simply being more kind and making small gestures of connection after years of being too scared of her husband's reaction to do so. And lo and behold, he responded so well, and their marriage, in her own words, became better than it had ever been. And over, other clients have reported that when I've encouraged them to do the loving thing, such as say, I love you first, their spouse has started to say, I love you back, and reciprocate their kindnesses. So that is the long-term comfort you can look forward to when you no longer let the fear of short-term discomfort stop you from bringing in more of the good stuff. Now, please know that it can sometimes take a bit of patience and consistency for your partner to start to trust it and feel comfortable enough with your more of the affection, the kindness, the love that you're bringing in for them to really receive it well and reciprocate it. So have patience, but also trust that it will come as you stick with it. You don't edit that part of yourself that wants to love and express affection and such. All right, the second key is to understand that the hard emotions you don't want to feel are actually not that terrible. They're just sensation in your body when you don't feed them with painful stories in your mind. I can't go into full depth on this right now, but you can get a taste of it now. Think of something that stirs up a bit of negative emotion, nothing too intense for this exercise. Feel free to pause the episode to think of this thing. Then notice how your body feels to feel that negative emotion. Specifically, focus on the sensations in your body. Like just notice what sensations are present. And if you're tempted to go into your mind and start spinning this into the story, getting caught up in your thoughts, simply call your attention back to your body. And just simply notice the sensations, where they are in your body, what they feel like in your body, and just allow them to be there. Be curious about what they feel like. And stick with this for about 30 seconds. You can pause this if you need to. And just notice what happens as you stay curious and simply allow the sensations to be, to shift, and to do what they do, whatever that is. And you should notice that you are okay, that you can handle these sensations and the way they feel. You should notice that the hard emotion is simply sensation in the body, and that when you sense it as such, you are safe to feel it. It doesn't kill you or cause anything but temporary, interesting, not so comfortable sensations in the body. And that's it. So really, it's not such a problem when hard emotions arise, particularly if you can keep your attention rooted in the sensations in your body. Now, again, there is more to this. And if you found this incredibly hard, there is other things that you're going to need support with in order to really allow yourself to feel safe and sort of comfortable with the discomfort. And I love teaching people this and supporting people to get to this place where discomfort is no big deal, where you can even feel peace with the discomfort that you might feel emotionally. Please know that I am here for you if you want more help with that. All right, the third key is remember that discomfort is the currency of your dreams. In other words, the path to your dream of a loving, connected, team-feel marriage is paved with discomfort. You must be willing to feel the discomfort to get to the good stuff, to get to the gold. And it is worth it because you're going to get so much more goodness out of it when you're willing to feel the discomfort. And because when you aren't willing to feel that stuff or face the hard stuff, the hard feelings, and act anyway, you're going to be stuck with discomfort anyway. The discomfort of not having that positive, loving culture between you, of not having that affection, of not having the compliments and the hugs and the supportiveness, and the discomfort of being jealous of couples who do have that culture of positivity you want, that's going to be there. That's what you're choosing to have. More discomfort, more long-term discomfort, instead of that short-term discomfort of feeling a little funny when you offer the loving words or you give that hug and your partner's a little weird about it. And those couples that you might feel envious of, they only created that beautiful culture of positivity because of their willingness to feel the temporary discomfort that inevitably comes up on the path to long-term comfort in a marriage. So, hopefully those 3 ways of thinking about this and working with that emotion, that negative emotion, will help you. And I want to make sure I don't forget to say it is good to be attuned to what is comfortable to our spouse and what may not be comfortable for them. But that doesn't mean editing who you are and your loving urges, at least not most of the time. Yes, of course, be sensitive to your spouse and don't bombard them with things you know are totally overwhelming them or making them deeply uncomfortable. But also, expressing love and kindness does not ever really hurt anyone. And be clear, love and neediness are not the same. And love and demand and forcing are definitely not the same. So make sure you're not coming from either of those places. But when you express an appreciation or you give that hug or you offer your spouse encouragement, even if your spouse is outwardly uncomfortable or you can tell he feels or he's kind of reacting awkwardly, it doesn't mean that he doesn't actually feel the love and deep down enjoy it. Yes, there may be a learning curve for you to be able to express your support and love in a way that your spouse is best able to receive it. And that's a completely worthy explorative journey to go on. But their discomfort with your love and kindness does not mean you should stop expressing it or diminish that incredible part of you. In fact, it's likely to be just what is needed, just the medicine called for your spouse to begin to be able to soften into it and receive the gift it is. It may be uncomfortable to your spouse only because it hasn't yet been part of his culture. It has been a bit foreign, right? Maybe his family wasn't very comfortable and didn't express affection or encourage each other. And so it feels like a foreign language. So of course it feels a little awkward. But that doesn't mean it's not so good for him. Again, it may be the essential remedy he and you and your relationship needs to feel safe enough and strong enough for you to both completely thrive in it. But only if you're brave enough to be willing to feel a bit uncomfortable and let your spouse feel a bit uncomfortable too, so that you can express the beautiful love that's within you. And after all, deep connection and loving intimacy are not all about having happy, easy experiences together, but also about being able to feel the full range of human emotions by each other's side. So you can come through it seeing that your love is still there, is still strong, in spite of the hard times that this life inevitably brings. And so you can trust you are both allowed to be your fully human selves in this relationship. that is the best of love. That is the most amazing marriage. And so much of it starts with being willing to learn how to feel more safe and more at peace and more comfortable with emotional discomfort. So it's time. And if you could use some loving support to help you feel safe with your deep feelings while also building the tangible skills that will make your marriage more and more connected and supportive and loving every day, come coach with me. I have a spot opening up soon for you. Over the next 4 months together, we'll launch you into an upward healing cycle in your relationship so you can finally feel trust that things will feel good, secure, light, and loving with your spouse into the future. So you can learn all about what coaching with me entails. I'll put the link in the description, or you can head over to www.hspmarriagecoaching.com and click the Work With Me tab. And the next tangible step to feel out if this is a really good fit for you is to fill out what I call the Great Mutual Fit form, which you'll also find in the description and on that page on my website. It takes maybe 10 minutes to fill out, and it will really help you get a good sense of whether this feels like a good fit for you. And when I see it, it will help me get a good sense of if this is a good fit for you. And then we can decide together if we want to get on a free consult call and help you get any lingering questions answered. So that's the process in a nutshell to get started coaching with me. So even if you're not 100% sure you want to do it, go ahead and take those steps so you can make a really informed decision that's best for you. And as always, I would be completely honored to coach you and help you make your marriage into the one you really want it to be. All right, my dear friends, be oh so well.